Virginia City, Nevada, January 1867. The entire engine company number 1 marches in full dress behind a wooden coffin. The Metropolitan Brass Band plays a slow funeral march. Julia Bulette is inside that box. Strangled in her own home the night before, her jewels taken, her body left on the bed. Every fireman in town walks behind her. Every miner on the Comstock stands at the roadside with his hat in his hand. And behind every lace curtain on C Street, the respectable women of Virginia City watch from the dark. Not one of them will step outside. Not one will be seen mourning a woman like her. Hollywood dressed these women in corsets and feathers and made them scenery. The truth was dirtier, harder, and more important than any film ever allowed. Of these 20 facts, one is the secret the frontier tried hardest to bury. I promise you, it is not the one you expect. Now, before we go any further, tap that subscribe button. Stay until the end. You might not want to miss where this leads. We are not going to the movies for this. We are going to the census rolls, the court dockets, the coroner's reports, and the letters these women sometimes left behind. The 1870s Cattletown Saloon was not the gleaming barroom you see on a screen. It was a long, narrow room with a plank floor sticky with spilled beer and tobacco juice, kerosene lamps throwing shadows on rough pine walls, the smell of cheap cigars and unwashed wool, and something sour underneath it all. In the boom years, men outnumbered women 10 or 20 to 1. Demand and money filled the gap the way they always do. And the women who stepped into it were used, taxed, depended on, and then never given the story they earned. We are going back to the real sources, the paper trail the frontier tried to destroy. Number 20. The name itself was a lie. Saloon girl covered everything from a card dealer to a dance partner to a woman selling the only thing the town would let her sell. The blur served everyone except the women it described. Census takers cooperated. In Dodge City and Tombstone, women working in saloons were recorded as seamstress, actress, boarding house keeper. The official paper was designed to look away before the ink was dry. Even the word prostitute almost never appeared in a Western census form. The bureaucracy of the frontier had 100 polite words for what was happening, and every one of them was chosen to protect the town, not the woman. The very language of the frontier was built to hide what was happening in plain sight. Number 19. Their primary job was selling drinks, not company. The model was called the Pretty Waiter Girl System, and it came out of the concert saloons of New York. Places like Harry Hill's on Houston Street. A woman sat beside a customer and kept his glass full. She earned a cut of every drink he bought. Cold tea poured from a whiskey bottle. Watered beer sold at the price of the real thing. The system followed the railroad west and landed in every cattle town that had a bar with a back room. A good earner moved more liquor in a night than the bartender did on his own. The house took its share, the woman took hers, and the man at the bar never knew the drink in his hand was half water. The romance was a sales pitch. The ledger book was the only truth that mattered. Number 18. The makeup was a professional uniform, and it was slowly killing the women who wore it. White lead paste spread thick across the face, vermilion on the cheeks, kohl drawn heavy around the eyes. You could identify a working woman from across a dirt street by the paint she carried. It was not vanity. It was a trademark as clear as a lawman's star. But the lead did its own quiet damage. Tremors in the hands, failing kidneys, slow poisoning no frontier doctor could name or treat. The beauty that kept the money coming was destroying the women wearing it one shift at a time. Lead was not banned from American cosmetics until the 20th century. Number 17. Most of these women did not choose the work the way the legend tells it. The trail to a saloon door almost always started with a loss. A husband dead of cholera 3 weeks out of independence. A man who walked into a mine and never came back. A father who gambled the family's claim away and disappeared on a westbound stage. In most territories before statehood, a married woman could not own property, could not sign a contract, could not file suit. A woman alone on the frontier without family or legal standing had almost no respectable employment open to her. She could take in laundry for pennies. She could sew until her eyes failed. Or she could walk through the door that paid. The frontier offered her one reliable way to eat, and then spent the next century condemning her for taking it. Number 16. Inside the trade, the hierarchy was merciless. At the top sat the parlor house. Velvet curtains, a piano in the front room, appointments by introduction only. A woman there kept a percentage and dressed in silk. At the bottom were the cribs, tiny shacks in a row, barely wide enough for a cot and a washstand. A flat price set by the house, no negotiation. Between those worlds lay the dance halls and the common brothels, each with its own rules and its own cut. A woman's place in that system decided whether she saved money or starved, and the distance from top to bottom could be crossed in a single bad week. A bout of illness, a lost protector, a madam who shut her doors. Any one of those could send a parlor house woman to the cribs before the month was out. Hollywood only ever showed the parlor house. The truth for most of these women was a wooden shack with a curtain for a door. Number 15. In Virginia City, Montana, in the 1860s, the dance halls recruited young women from Germany, Bohemia, and Scandinavia. They were called hurdy-gurdy girls, 75 cents to $1 per dance, split with the house. The music was short by design. A good night meant dozens of turns across a plank floor. Thomas Dimsdale described the scene in 1866. The dust rising under boot heels, the laughter, the line of men with coins ready. Many of these women were not prostitutes. They were dancers. But the town drew the line between decent and indecent wherever it pleased, and the women had no say in where it fell. A dance was just a dance until a newspaper editor or a preacher decided it was something else, and once that word was spoken, it stuck for life. We are 10 entries from the secret the frontier buried deepest. Stay with me. Number 14. They bankrolled the very towns that looked down on them. In Dodge City, the police court levied fines on named women every single month. The dockets survive. You can read the names today. That money paid the marshal's wages. It paid for the jail and the school. The church 1 block over was built with revenue that traced back to the same street the preacher denounced on Sunday mornings. Frontier towns did not merely tolerate the trade, they structured their budgets around it. The fines were not punishments, they were taxes with a different name. And when the time came to write the respectable founding story, they pretended that money had come from somewhere clean. Number 13. Laudanum was the only painkiller most of them ever knew. Opium dissolved in grain alcohol, sold at every general store without a question. Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, 25 cents a bottle. For a woman working the cribs in pain, with no doctor inside a day's ride, it was the one thing that dulled the edges enough to get through the night. Addiction was not a moral failure on the frontier. It was built into the infrastructure of survival. By the 1890s, American opium consumption per person had reached its recorded peak. The women on the line stood at the center of that wave, and nobody was counting them. Number 12. They carried weapons because the law would not carry one for them. A derringer inside a garter holster. a hat pin ground to a needlepoint, a short blade in the top of a boot. Violence against these women was nightly and routine. A man could beat a woman in a back room and walk home to supper without a word from anyone wearing a badge. She learned early to arm herself, or she learned what happened to the ones who did not. Today, about 1 in 4 American women reports experiencing intimate partner violence in her lifetime. On the frontier, for women in this trade, the number was closer to a certainty. The weapons they carried were not decoration. They were the thin line between finishing a shift and never being seen again. Number 11. Some of them sat down at the card tables and beat every man in the room. In Deadwood, a woman named Alice Ivers dealt faro and poker across 3 decades. The town called her Poker Alice. She smoked cigars at the table, carried a revolver, and once claimed she had won more than $250,000 over a lifetime of cards. In Fort Griffin, Texas, a woman called Lottie Dino played the high-stakes games and rarely lost. Her real name was Carlotta Tompkins. She later settled in Deming, New Mexico, joined the church, and became one of the most respected women in town. Nobody who shook her hand on Sunday knew what her hands had done on a Saturday night in Fort Griffin. The card-dealing women are the clearest proof that Saloon Girl was never one job. It was a dozen different lives the frontier refused to see separately. Number 10. Syphilis and gonorrhea followed the cattle trails into every town with a red light street. The treatment was mercury, rubbed on the skin, swallowed in pills, sometimes injected. It destroyed teeth first, then kidneys, then the mind. Some towns ordered medical inspections for the women on the line. Almost none required them of the men who came through the door. The disease arrived from both sides of the transaction. The consequences fell on one. A woman could be fined for working without a health certificate. The man who gave her the illness walked away without his name written down anywhere. We are closing in. The entry the frontier worked hardest to erase has not appeared yet. Number 9. A saloon girl heard everything. She sat beside men who were drunk, careless, and talking too freely. She heard about cattle deals before they closed, claimed disputes before they turned violent, planned robberies and old grudges and debts owed to dangerous men. Some passed what they heard to the marshal. Some passed it to the men the marshal was hunting. Some played both sides and collected from each. The saloon was the intelligence hub of the frontier, and the women inside it were the network. Every secret in a cattle town passed through the room where she poured the drinks. She was never credited and never thanked. But she knew more about what was coming than any man wearing a badge. Number 8. The cribs were where most of the actual work happened, and they were built to be forgotten. Narrow wooden shacks barely wide enough for a bed. Some had a door. Some had only a cloth nailed to the frame. In Butte, Montana, entire blocks of Pleasant Alley were lined with them. The women inside were the lowest paid, the most exposed to violence, and the least likely to survive the decade. A few photographs of Butte's crib rows survive in the archives. If one single image could replace every Western ever filmed, those photographs would do it. Number 7. Among women on the frontier, those working the saloons and the cribs died by their own hand at a rate that dwarfed every other group. Laudanum swallowed by the bottle, a pistol shot in a back room, carbolic acid, cheap and available at any store, burned its way through from the inside. The newspapers printed these deaths in a line or two. A woman known as, and then no family name, no age, no place of birth. The coroner filed his one-line verdict, and the town forgot her by morning. The violence done to these women was not only physical, it was the violence of not being worth a full obituary. Number 6. And yet some became the wealthiest people the frontier ever produced. Mattie Silks ran her house on Market Street in Denver for over 30 years and owned property across the city. Josephine Hensley arrived in Helena, Montana with nothing and built what the town called Chicago Joe's, a real estate empire anchored by a dance hall and a string of buildings. Jenny Rogers built the famous House of Mirrors in Denver and furnished it with diamond dust wallpaper and French furniture shipped overland by wagon. These women bought land, loaned money, and invested in mines. They held genuine economic power in a system that barely admitted they were persons. The law said they were nothing. The property records tell a different story. Number 5. In the 1880s and 90s, the respectable women of the frontier declared open war on the ones who were not. Temperance crusaders targeted saloon girls by name and by address. In Kansas, Carrie Nation walked into saloons with a hatchet and called the women inside agents of damnation. But pay attention to who was never named. Not the city councils collecting fines, not the landlords cashing rent on the crib buildings, not the men who lined up at the doors every night. The moral crusade attacked the women who were visible. It left the men and the money and the entire structure standing exactly where it was. Number 4. The saloon girl you imagine when you hear that phrase is almost certainly the wrong woman. On the Barbary coast of San Francisco, Chinese women were held in narrow alley cribs the city later bulldozed. In the border towns from El Paso to Tucson, Mexican women worked houses. The English language papers rarely mentioned. In Dodge City and Deadwood, black women worked segregated houses at lower prices with even less protection. Presbyterian mission workers in San Francisco documented the trafficking of Chinese women into the crib trade throughout the 1870s. Their reports survive. The faces in those reports look nothing like the face on the movie poster. Hollywood did not just romanticize the saloon girl, it erased most of the women who actually did the work. Number 3. Killing a saloon girl was barely treated as a crime. Julia Bulette was strangled in her bed in 1867. Her killer, a French drifter named Jean Milin, was caught only because he tried to sell her jewelry around town. He was convicted and hanged, but during his trial, the respectable women of Virginia City brought him flowers in his cell. They signed petitions begging the governor to spare his life. They had more sympathy for the man who strangled her than for the woman he killed. And this case is remembered precisely because a conviction happened at all. For most women on the line who were beaten or murdered, no one was charged. No one was questioned. The body was removed. The room was cleaned. The next woman moved in by the end of the week. Number 2. Many of these women were mothers. Children appear in census records listed at brothel addresses. No father named. Sometimes no surname given at all. Some women sent children to distant schools when the money stretched. Others kept them hidden in back rooms and hoped the town would never ask. More than a few stayed in the work past the point of endurance for one reason: to save enough to send a child somewhere the child would never have to do what the mother did. Today, roughly 2 million single mothers in this country work 2 or more jobs to keep a roof overhead. The numbers have changed. The weight has not. The image of the saloon girl never includes a child. The real story almost always did. Number 1. When the frontier civilized, the towns erased them. And now the one the frontier buried deepest of all. The railroad brought families. The territory applied for statehood. The businessmen who had built fortunes on a tax base that included the red light district decided it was time to clean the story. Gravestones were pulled from cemetery ground or left deliberately blank. Names were scratched from civic ledgers. Red light districts were bulldozed and paved over with banks and churches and gift shops. Dodge City did it. Deadwood did it. Denver did it. Tombstone did it. The women who had paid the fines that funded the marshal and the school and the fire company were written out of the founding story as though they had never existed. not because they were shameful, because remembering them would have shamed everyone else. How do we know what was erased? Because paper is more stubborn than memory. Ann Butler went through court dockets the towns thought no one would ever open again. She read the fines and followed the money. Paula Petrik dug into the property records of Helena and found the empires these women built that their own city tried to bury. Michael Rutter tracked cemetery logs that showed plots paid for but never given a headstone. Newspapers from the territorial era printed names the official histories later scratched out. The evidence survived in dusty county offices and forgotten archive boxes. But someone had to care enough to go looking for it. And the people who built the legend you were handed instead? The dime novelists took desperate, resourceful women and turned them into willing temptresses in satin and pearls. The film studios dressed actresses in costumes no woman on a dirt street in Dodge City ever wore, and posed them smiling at a cowboy in a hat that had never seen a day of dust. And the tourism industry finished the job. Walk through Tombstone today, walk through Deadwood, old brothels converted to gift shops, cheerful signs, souvenir postcards. Not one word about the woman who died of mercury poisoning in the back room, or the child who grew up behind a curtain on the second floor. The image in your head was not earned on a frontier street. It was built on a movie set and sold back to you as history. So here is my answer to the question I asked at the start. The dirtiest fact about saloon girls is not what they did. It is what was done to them after. Whole towns ran on their labor, taxed their bodies, used the money to build the courthouse and the school and the church. And the moment the territory was respectable enough to feel the shame, those same towns scraped the women's names off the record and pretended the money had come from decent men doing decent work. Today, you can walk the main street of a dozen old western towns and never see a single plaque, not one name carved in stone for the women whose fines paid for the street beneath your boots. The frontier did not erase them because they were worthless. It erased them because admitting what they were worth would have cost the town its pride. Somewhere under pavement that now holds a souvenir shop, there is ground where a woman lived and worked and died, and not one soul alive can tell you her name. Which of these 20 would you have wanted the world to remember? Tell me below. I read every single comment, and some of you carry family stories from this era that deserve to be heard. If your grandmother or great-grandmother lived a life the history books left out, this is the place to tell it. And if you want the truth behind another frontier story the movies got wrong, the next one is already waiting for you right now.